we're here to talk about the argument for morality, and I'm wondering if you wanted to start us off with giving us like your understanding of the argument, or maybe how you employ it to suggest or prove that your God specifically exists.
Yes, I appreciate that last contingent. I'm not arguing for the Baha'i faith. I'm not arguing for Hinduism. I have no expertise in those religions. I would have no idea how to begin to defend their cosmologies or teleologies or any of the other ologies we like in theology. See, that's another ology. But I would say that we have objective morality. There are some things that are objectively immoral. I'm not going to no true Scotsman it into oblivion. The fact of the matter is that if you are a newborn child is placed in front of you, you shouldn't kill it. That's a natural human instinct. You obviously have societies that acted contrary to this. For example, the Spartans would see something that was wrong with a baby and they'd chuck it off a mountain. Now, here's the thing. Did that society know it was objectively wrong? There were people in that society who did know it was objectively wrong. The mothers cried over it. The fathers were horribly broken by it. And it was a tradition that was kept alive only by a repressive totalitarian state. So there you have natural morality revolting against societally imposed morality. But if objective morality exists in the modern world, there must be a transcendent source of values, which we can identify as a theistic God. Objective moral values, such as the belief, in my opinion, that murdering newborns is wrong, cannot be subjective or suggestive an opinion or a societal construct. The existence of moral law implies a moral lawgiver. I'd also note that people have objective moral duties. A moral lawgiver is the one who imposes these moral duties. People often have a sense of obligation or duty to act in a certain way. For example, if somebody shows up at your door who's just been shot and is bleeding out, no matter what you actually do, in your mind, your first sense is obviously a little bit of suspicion how to get shot, but you're also very concerned about the death of a human life. These things are naturally concerning to you. Additionally, we know that telling the truth within a rounding error, like 90% of instances, telling the truth is a right thing to do. Helping those in need, helping the poor is the right thing to do. This sense of moral duty, it impels us to believe in the existence of a higher authority that prescribes and enforces moral obligations. Last one. If humans are not morally or are morally accountable for their actions, there must be a God who holds them accountable. The idea of moral accountability, what it does is it says that there is a final judgment and helps to keep humans accountable. Justice is served and wrong actions are properly punished. Without a theistic God, moral accountability would be arbitrary or non-existent. Now, this last one is not necessarily for you, but it's for those MTDs out there, those moralistic therapeutic deists who, they do believe in God, but they just don't believe in the Bible or any other set of morality. So there's a large group of people over there, and I'd like to say that. And there's all things about moral order, moral development, and things like that. But those are the two that I would like to lead with the third on the end. So the argument for moral values and the argument for moral duties.
Okay. So let's start off with your very first part here, and that's that, if you lay a baby in front of somebody, you instinctually know that it's wrong to kill the baby.
Yes.
And you think that that's sort of like an innate thing that just everybody knows.
I believe it's a priori knowledge for the vast majority of the human population. We do have, certainly we'd have exceptions such as people like psychopaths who have this sort of deviance. And it's acknowledged, by the way, that they do have a deviance psychologically.
But you can't have exceptions.
Absolutely you can have exceptions. Many.
I don't think that you can.
Now, I think that things that apply for the vast majority of the population, especially within it's like when you especially have a name for the people that don't have it, usually implies otherwise universal existence. For example, we know that 99% of whatever is in a glass of water is H2O, but the other little teeny tiny bit is hydronium. You have this little teeny tiny exception, but it doesn't mean that the glass isn't filled with water. I mean, you have these little teeny tiny exceptions. They happen in science. They happen in philosophy. They happen in other things too. They happen in biology by oodles and oodles. So I don't think it's
okay.
valuable.
Let me ask you this.
Of course.
Let me ask you this. Are you of the is your understanding of God and moral laws and everything like that, is that these moral laws are written on our hearts?
Yeah, I would say to a large instance. Now, I'm not a Calvinist, but Calvinists would go down the line and say it's prescribed in our hearts from the beginning, and some people it is, and some people it isn't. Now, see, if I was a Calvinist, I could take an easy way out of your argument and say, okay, well, the people who don't have it just aren't elect. They aren't bent towards goodness. But I would also say that there are psychopaths who aren't murderers. There are sociopaths who don't manipulate people around them. There are narcissists who try to live good lives, and it's because they know objectively that these things are wrong. There's been many studies about whether psychopaths
do they know that these things are wrong, or have they been told that these things are wrong?
That's a great question.
Their experience that these things are wrong.
Scientific inquiry, psychological inquiry, is actually still going into this about whether psychopaths know what they're doing is morally wrong. The jury is still out on that one. I mean, I'm sure you can find one study that goes this way and one study that goes that way. But the question of whether psychopaths have a sort of like thing that says, well, I know this is wrong, but I'm going to do it anyways, is up for debate. You can probody find studies that go either way. I've seen studies that say psychopaths do know that's what's more.
I feel like the definition of psychopathy is the fact that you don't inherently know that something is wrong, or that you don't know these social norms, or that you don't know that deviating from these social norms is a bad or wrong thing. You also lack empathy. Which is another thing which is a factor that goes into the fact that they don't see anything wrong with like killing another person.
Yeah. So we have.
Why would God make somebody like that?
So that's a good question, and I honestly can say we don't really know what happens with all these things. Now, there's of course a lot of human factors that go into what happens to someone's DNA when they're conceived, what happens in the womb. We know birth control has effects on the genetics. We know PFAS, the forever chemicals that are in the water. I mean, they do have psychological effects on children. We know that certain chemicals in the water actually lean towards giving people. I mean, we know this is. I mean, you saw the lead in the water at Flint. That caused several cases of psychological disorders in developing children. We know that stuff in the poison water can affect embryonic and things like that. And so I obviously can't provide a full explanation.
But I feel like what you just said is that birth control causes people to be psychopaths.
No, I'm saying that birth control and other such outsider variables have influences on the development of the fetus.
Well, from a naturalistic, so from a naturalistic perspective, I can agree, because the psychopathy and sociopathy, both of those things can be genetic. There's also environmental issues that you can look at for causing those particular mental disorders and everything like that. But I feel like attacking it from that, in your position. Is really kind of ignoring the ramifications of Christian theology, because Christian theology says that God made them that way, not that God allowed the environment to change them in that way, or allowed this genetic disease, or maybe God did allow this genetic disease, but in either case, God could have prevented those psychopaths and sociopaths from being born the way that they were.
Yeah, I understand your argument. And first, I'd like to cite, just on the thing we went before, somebody said cite a source, and it's Mike Sema, Franca Tonier, and Mark D. Hauser's article published. It was published in a neuroscience magazine. I have the DOI for everyone, but it says the results of their study. This is from the abstract. These results force a rejection of the strong hypothesis that emotional processes are caused necessarily from judgments or moral dilemmas, suggesting instead that psychopaths understand the distinction between right and wrong, but do not care about some knowledge or the consequences that ensue from their morally inappropriate behavior. I can provide the citation for that. Somebody asked for a citation, I must provide.
Right, but in that particular conclusion, I think that there's a difference in understanding why it's right or wrong. Is different from knowing like the social norms, like the social norms say that this is wrong. That's different from understanding why it's wrong.
So they did several controls on this test for age, sex, health, delinquents, any other sorts of things. They took people from a variety of psychological contexts. I haven't studied the full methodology, so I'm not going to say this completely rebukes what you're saying, but we do have several patterns in society that are quite consistent. Now, obviously, there are going to be deviations, because there are always deviations. Just because people do something doesn't mean it's always right. But I will say this, is that we have right now the fact that we are a fallen race. We are a fallen race. We fell from the Garden of Eden. We fell from the Garden of Eden. We have polluted our environment. We have despoiled our birthright. We have ruined the environment. We have polluted the skies. We fill people with hatred and animosity and things like that. And we cannot expect God to just step in and go, well, you messed up, time to reset everything and give you all paradise on earth to live in, because he already did that and we messed it up. And so what I will say is this. Human suffering, the origin of human suffering right now is human action. And a lot of the times it's not the person's own fault. And that is awfully sad. No, it isn't the person's fault. If somebody drinks poison water while they're pregnant, that's not their fault that their baby ends up with these conditions. And God does not intervene because he has given over the title deed for earth to humanity, and we gave it over to Satan. We gave it over to Satan, not in the garden, but a little bit afterwards. You have the whole thing with Job. You have Satan being cast down from the heavens. And that's a really important thing, is that we gave the earth over to sin. I'm
getting a little bit of whiplash here, because we're violently shifting between two different mindsets here. Okay. Because Gabriel, look, on the one hand, you're citing scientific studies and you're talking about all these environmental issues, and I'm like, there can be environmental issues, genetic disorders, and all that cause certain mental conditions like psychopathy and sociopathy. But then we shift over here and it's like, but you know what? Fucking magic is the reason why shit's happening now. And
this is the problem with debating an apologetics person who's also a Democrat. Is that we switch from agreeing on, the water is poison and corporations are to blame and people are suffering, over to what you consider the realm of Narnia over here with, the magic and everything.